My name is Oakley Watts, 19, from a small coastal town in Maine. I've always been the overlooked one. While my brother Mason was the golden boy, I was just there. On my 18th birthday, my grandmother's lawyer handed me a sealed envelope at dinner. Inside was a cashier's check for $250,000, everything she'd left me to build my future. For a second, I felt seen. But the next morning, my parents burst into my room, demanding I give the money to Mason to save the family's image. When I refused, my dad snatched the check from my hands, saying, "You don't know what's best for this family. We do." In that moment, something in me broke. What would you do if your parents tried to steal your future? I've always hated the sound of seagulls in the morning. Everyone says it's peaceful, like something out of a postcard, but to me it's just another reminder that nothing ever really changes in this town. Same waves, same docks, same faces pretending everything's perfect. My name is Oakley Watts, 19. Born and raised in a small coastal town in Maine where everybody knows your family business, and mine is a mess behind closed doors. From the outside, we look like the picture-perfect family. My dad owns a small boat repair shop by the pier, my mom's part of the church committee, and my brother Mason, oh Mason, he's the golden boy. Star athlete, class president, full-ride scholarship to some fancy business school. He was the kind of person adults love to brag about. And me, I was Mason's little sister. Quiet, responsible, invisible. I learned early on that in this house, my job wasn't to shine, it was to stay out of the way. Every family dinner was a performance. Mom would set the table like we were expecting a magazine photo shoot, Dad would make some joke about Mason's bright future, and Mason would sit back, soaking it all in. If I mentioned anything about my own day, it usually ended with, "That's nice, honey," before they turned the spotlight right back to him. I used to smile and nod, pretending it didn't hurt, pretending I didn't notice. But things started to shift around the time I turned 18. Dad's business wasn't doing so great. Mason had invested part of his future empire into some sketchy startup run by his frat buddies, and surprise, it crashed. Big time. They didn't talk about it openly, but the late-night whispers, the closed-door arguments, and the way Dad's hands shook when bills came and told me everything. There was trouble. And when there's trouble, the Watts family has a way of pretending it doesn't exist until they find someone to clean it up. That someone was usually me. The night before my birthday, Mom came into my room while I was reading. She sat on the edge of my bed, smoothing out the comforter like she always does when she's about to say something serious. "Oakley, honey," she began softly, "tomorrow's going to be a big day. Let's try to make it special, okay? No tension, please." I looked up from my book. "Why would there be tension?" She forced a smile. "You know how your brother can be unpredictable. Just go with the flow, don't make a scene." That was Mom's way of saying, don't embarrass Mason. Don't ruin his moment, even on my birthday. The next day, the house buzzed with activity. Balloons tied to the porch railing, the smell of cinnamon cake filling the kitchen, laughter echoing down the hallway. But it wasn't for me. It never really was. Mason had just returned from college for the summer, and the moment he walked through the door, it was like the sun rose for the first time. Everyone fussed over him, asked about his classes, his friends, his big plans. I stood by the kitchen counter, sipping lemonade, watching them orbit around him like planets around a star. Then, in the middle of the chaos, a man in a dark suit showed up. He wasn't from town. Everyone paused as he stepped into the living room, holding a slim leather briefcase. Mom's polite smile faltered. Dad stiffened. Mason raised an eyebrow. "Is this?" I whispered. The man cleared his throat. "I'm here on behalf of the late Mrs. Edith Watts," he announced. My heart jumped. Grandma Edith. She passed away 2 months ago, and I hadn't expected to hear her name again so soon. He opened the briefcase, pulled out a sealed envelope with my name on it. "This is for Oakley Watts," he said. "It's to be delivered on her 18th birthday." The room went dead silent. I stepped forward, hands trembling as I took the envelope. My name, written in her neat cursive. My throat tightened. I carefully opened it, and inside was a cashier's check for $250,000. My eyes widened. There was also a small note for Oakley. "Build the life you deserve," her handwriting still steady and strong. For a second, everything blurred. All the noise around me faded. Grandma always saw me not as Mason's shadow, but as me. This was her final gift, her way of saying, "I see you." But when I looked up, their faces told a different story. Mom's smile froze like porcelain. Dad's jaw clenched. Mason let out a low chuckle like this was some kind of prank. "Wow," he said. "Didn't see that coming." And right then, deep down, I knew this was going to change everything. I woke up the next morning to the smell of coffee and the sound of muffled voices downstairs. At first, it felt like any other day. The sun was streaming through the curtains, the gulls were screaming outside like they always did, and for a brief, fragile moment, I let myself believe that maybe things would be different now. I rolled over and stared at the envelope sitting on my desk. The check was still inside, tucked neatly where I'd left it the night before. It felt unreal. $250,000. A future. Freedom. My hands itched to touch it again, like I needed to make sure it hadn't all been a dream. Then I heard it, my dad's voice. Low, tense, in that we're making a decision tone he used when Mason got in trouble at school and they had to strategize. My heart sank. Before I could even sit up fully, my bedroom door burst open. My mom and dad stood there, dressed like they were heading to Sunday service, serious, coordinated, and armed with that look. The one that meant, we're not here to discuss, we're here to tell. Morning, I said cautiously. Dad didn't bother with pleasantries. He walked straight toward my desk and picked up the envelope. We need to talk about this, he said, waving it slightly. I pushed myself up on my elbows. Okay, talk. Mom sat down on the edge of my bed, smoothing the sheets like she always did before delivering bad news. Sweetheart, she began, we're so proud of you. Your grandmother clearly wanted the best for you, but you know how things are right now. The business, Mason's situation, this money, it could save everything. I blinked. Excuse me. Dad cut in, his voice firmer. We need to use the funds to cover the loans Mason took out. It's not just about him, Oakley. It's about the family. Our reputation is at stake. I laughed. It wasn't funny, but it slipped out anyway. You're joking, right? Mason appeared in the doorway then, wearing sweatpants and his usual smugness. What's going on? He asked, though from the glint in his eyes, I knew he'd been listening the whole time. Mom turned to him like he was the president walking into a press briefing. We're explaining things to your sister, she said gently. My sister, not Oakley, just your sister. Dad held up the check between two fingers. This is what's going to fix everything, he said like he was unveiling a magic wand. I felt my chest tighten. No, that's not your decision. Grandma gave that to me, for me. Mason scoffed. Come on, Oakley. You don't actually need that much money. I have real responsibilities. I messed up, sure, but this could get me back on track, for all of us. For all of us, Mom echoed, nodding. I stared at them, trying to make sense of what was happening. They weren't even pretending to ask. This wasn't a conversation. This was a declaration. Dad stepped closer, lowering his voice like I was a child he needed to lecture. You're young, you don't understand the bigger picture. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the family. I stood up. Yeah. Somehow I'm always the one making them. His jaw tightened. Oakley, no, my voice cracked. Grandma trusted me, she saw me, and you're not taking that away. For a second, no one spoke. Then Dad's hand shot out faster than I expected, and he snatched the check from my hand. Hey, I lunged for it, but he held it high, out of reach like I was 10 again. Mom rose to her feet, her voice calm but cold. This is for the good of the family. You'll thank us one day. I couldn't believe it. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. This is theft, I whispered. Dad glared down at me. No, this is parenting. Then they turned and walked out, envelope in hand, Mason smirking over his shoulder like he'd already won. The door slammed. I sank onto the edge of my bed, shaking. The walls suddenly felt smaller, the room colder. For years, I'd told myself if I just kept my head down, if I didn't cause trouble, things would eventually get better. But that morning, staring at the empty spot on my desk, I knew something inside me had cracked. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. I didn't cry that morning. Not like I usually did when they pushed me aside. This time, the tears didn't come. Just this steady, burning heat sitting low in my chest. I stared at the door long after they'd gone, listening to the sound of their footsteps fading down the hall. Then Mason laughed, a short, satisfied sound, and it snapped me out of the haze. They really thought they could just take it, like I didn't matter. Like Grandma's final gift was theirs by default. Not this time. I grabbed my phone, hands still shaking, and dialed the number from the lawyer's card, the one who had brought the envelope the night before. It rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Good morning, this is Samuel Green's office. Hi, this is Oakley Watts. You were here yesterday, my grandmother's lawyer? Yes, Miss Watts, of course, how can I help you? I swallowed hard. My parents, they took the check. I need to know, do they have any legal right to use it? There was a pause, papers rustling on the other end. Then his voice came back, calm and clear. No, the funds belong solely to you. Your grandmother's estate designated you as the sole beneficiary of that account. Unless you sign something authorizing them, they cannot legally access it. Something inside me steadied. Okay, so if they try to cash it, you should contact the bank immediately, he advised. Place a hold. If anyone attempts to deposit or withdraw without your authorization, the bank will flag it as fraudulent. I thanked him, hung up, and immediately called the bank. My voice wavered a little at first. It always did when I had to sound adult on the phone, but once I explained the situation, the banker's tone shifted fast. Ms. Watts, we can put a temporary freeze on the check and flag any attempted deposits for investigation. Would you like us to do that? Yes, I said without hesitation. Done, and don't worry, this happens more often than you'd think. That last sentence hit me weird. More often than you'd think. How many families had stories like mine? How many kids had something stolen under the excuse of family duty? I ended the call, leaned back in my chair, and exhaled shakily. Step 1, protect the money. Done, but the house didn't feel safe anymore. Every sound made my stomach knot. When I went downstairs later, Mom and Dad were sitting at the kitchen table, coffee mugs in hand, talking in hushed tones that stopped the moment I entered. The envelope was nowhere to be seen. Mason leaned against the counter like a smug watchdog. Dad looked up. Where did you go this morning? Nowhere, I said flatly, grabbing a piece of toast. Mom folded her hands like she was about to conduct a board meeting. We need to talk about your attitude. This behavior isn't appropriate. I stared at her. You stole my money. Her lips pressed together. Watch your tone, young lady. Oh, I'm sorry, I shot back. Do you prefer thank you instead? Mason snorted. You're being dramatic. I turned to him, heat rising. You're the reason this is happening, Mason. You screwed up, and now they think I should clean up your mess. He shrugged like it was the weather. Families help each other. Funny, I said. I don't remember anyone helping me. Dad slammed his mug down. Enough, you're part of this family whether you like it or not, and you will do the right thing. My heartbeat roared in my ears. No, I said clearly. I won't. The silence that followed was heavy. I could feel Mom's eyes burning into me, Dad's fury simmering beneath the surface, Mason's arrogance. But I didn't flinch this time. After breakfast, I went upstairs and locked my door. I texted Lily, my best friend since middle school, a simple line. They took the check. Within seconds, she called. What, Oakley, are you kidding me? Nope, I said, flopping onto my bed. They just grabbed it and walked out like it was theirs, but I froze it. They can't cash it now. That's my girl, she said, her voice fierce. Come stay with me for a few days, seriously. My parents won't mind. You need to get out of that house. I hesitated. Leaving wasn't something I ever did. I'd spent my entire life playing by their rules, staying in my lane. But for the first time, their house didn't feel like home. It felt like enemy territory. Yeah, I whispered. Maybe I should. As the day went on, they kept trying to talk. But every conversation was the same: guilt trips, manipulation, lectures about loyalty. By the time night fell, I'd packed a small duffel bag and hid it under my bed. I stared at the framed photo of Grandma Edith on my dresser. Her eyes seemed to follow me, kind but firm. She was the only one who'd ever told me I deserved more than this small, suffocating life. I'm not letting them take it from me, I whispered. Not this time. Packing wasn't hard. Most of my stuff could fit in a single duffel bag. Funny how 19 years of living in the same house could be reduced to clothes, a laptop, and a few books. I left the framed photo of Grandma Edith for last. It was a picture of us on the pier when I was 10, me grinning with a gap-toothed smile, her arm around my shoulders. She always smelled like lavender and ocean wind. I wrapped the frame carefully in a sweatshirt and slid it into the side pocket of my bag. I waited until after dinner to leave. Mason was out with friends, Mom was in the living room pretending to watch TV, and Dad was in his office going over bills, probably figuring out how to get their hands on the money now that the bank had frozen the check. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I texted Lily, leaving now, 5 minutes. Her reply came instantly, I'm outside. I grabbed my bag, tiptoed down the stairs, avoiding the creaky step near the kitchen. But just as I reached for the front door, Mom's voice cut through the quiet. Oakley. I froze. She was standing at the end of the hallway, arms crossed, her expression caught somewhere between concern and control. Where are you going? I could have lied, said I was staying at Lily for a study night, but I was done lying to make them comfortable. I'm leaving, I said simply. Her eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? I'm staying with Lily for a while. She stepped closer. Why would you do that? This is your home. I almost laughed. Is it? Her jaw tightened. You're overreacting. We're just trying to do what's best for everyone. Once Mason's situation is fixed, everything will go back to normal. There's no normal to go back to, I said. You stole from me, Mom, you both did. And now you want me to sit here and pretend everything's fine? For a second, I saw something flash in her eyes, shame, doubt. It was gone just as quickly, replaced by that familiar, icy resolve. If you walk out that door, Oakley, don't expect things to be the same when you come back. I tightened my grip on the doorknob. Good, and I walked out. Lily's car was idling at the curb, headlights off. She hopped out when she saw me, grabbed my bag, and threw it in the trunk like we were running from a crime scene. "You actually did it," she said as we climbed in. "Yeah," I breathed, staring at the house shrinking behind us. "I did." Her parents welcomed me like I'd been their kid all along. Mrs. Thompson handed me a warm blanket the moment I walked in. Mr. Thompson made bad dad jokes to lighten the mood. Their house smelled like cinnamon and paint, cluttered in a way that felt alive. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Later that night, lying on Lily's pull-out couch, I couldn't sleep. My brain replayed every moment, Dad snatching the check, Mom's cold warning, Mason's smirk. Anger simmered beneath the surface, steady and sharp. But alongside it was something else, clarity. For the first time, I was physically out of their space. I could breathe. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls from Mom, 3 voicemails, one from Dad, one text from Mason that just said, "Running away doesn't make you right." I deleted it without replying. Mom's first voicemail was sweet, the kind that made outsiders believe we were a happy family. "Honey, we just want to talk. Come home, we love you." The second was sharper. "You're being immature, Oakley. This isn't how family behaves." The third made my blood run cold. "If you don't come home and sign over that check, your father will take legal action. This isn't a game." I played them all for Lily while we ate cereal at her kitchen island. She nearly choked on her spoon. "Legal action? For what, being the legal owner of your own money?" I shrugged, half laughing, half on the verge of screaming. "They'll do anything to scare me back." Lily's dad, overhearing from the sink, wiped his hands and said, "Don't let them intimidate you, kid. If that money's legally yours, they don't have a leg to stand on." His confidence grounded me. I wasn't alone anymore. I spent the rest of the day gathering everything I could: emails from Grandma, copies of legal documents from the lawyer, bank statements. I scanned everything into a folder on my laptop titled My Future. Just seeing that name made me feel stronger. That evening, I sat on Lily's porch watching the sun dip into the ocean. My hometown had always looked the same, but from here, it felt different, like I was finally seeing it on my own terms. My phone buzzed again, Mom's name. I turned it face down on the table. "I think this is the first time I've ever said no to them," I admitted quietly. Lily sipped her soda. "Feels good, doesn't it?" "Yeah," I said, a small smile creeping across my face. "It really does." Lily's house was warm in a way mine never was, not just the temperature, but the feeling. People actually talked here, laughed, even argued without tearing each other down. I'd only been there 2 nights, but it already felt more like home than the house I'd grown up in. On the third morning, I woke up early, heart pounding, with a mix of anxiety and determination. The calls and texts from my parents hadn't stopped, they'd just gotten nastier. Mason had sent me a string of messages, calling me selfish, accusing me of destroying the family name. Dad had left a voicemail hinting that if I didn't cooperate, they'd find another way to get the money. It wasn't just pressure anymore, it was a threat. I sat at Lily's kitchen counter, staring at my laptop. I'd opened the folder labeled My Future again. Legal docs, bank statements, Grandma's note, every piece of evidence that said, "This is yours, Oakley. Don't let them take it." I picked up my phone and called Mr. Green's office again. This time, I didn't sound like a scared kid. I sounded like someone who had something to protect. "Miss Watts," he said warmly when he recognized my voice. "How are you holding up?" "I've had better weeks," I said dryly. "I need to understand exactly what my legal options are. My dad mentioned taking legal action. Is that even possible?" He paused. "Technically, anyone can file a claim, but from what I've seen, they have no legal grounds. Your grandmother's will was airtight. If they forged anything or attempt to access the funds again, that's fraud, and that's serious." His calmness steadied me. "So what can I do to protect myself long-term?" "I'd recommend setting up a trust account. That way the funds can't be accessed without your explicit permission. I can help with that." We scheduled a meeting for later that week. Hanging up, I felt stronger, like I had a shield now, not just panic. That afternoon, Lily and I drove to the library to use the public computers, her idea. "Your parents probably still have access to your Wi-Fi. If they're desperate, they might try to snoop." She wasn't wrong. We spent hours digging through public records, old newspaper clippings, even property filings. Lily had a knack for this kind of stuff. She called it small-town detective work. And then, buried deep in a local business registry update, we found it. "Holy crap," Lily whispered, pointing at the screen. "Look at this." A filing from 3 months ago showed that my dad had mortgaged our house against Mason's failed business loan, $200,000, and it wasn't just a cosign. He'd used family property, including Grandma's old summer cabin, as collateral. I felt my stomach drop. He risked Grandma's cabin? Yeah, Lily said. And that loan in default. Which means they're about to lose everything, I finished quietly. Suddenly, it all made sense. The desperation, the late-night whispers, the way Dad's hands had started shaking over bills. This wasn't just about Mason. This was about saving themselves from their own mess. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a new number. I opened the message. Oakley, we need to talk. Please meet me at the cafe on Harbor Street, just us. Mason Lily leaned over my shoulder. You're not seriously thinking about going, are you? I chewed my lip. If he's reaching out alone, it means he wants something. And if he wants something, maybe I can find out more, she groaned. Fine, but I'm sitting at the next table with a muffin and my phone recording, got it? I laughed softly. Deal. That evening, we walked into the Harbor Street Cafe. It smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon rolls. Mason was already there, sitting by the window in his varsity jacket, trying way too hard to look casual. He smiled when he saw me, the kind of smile he used when he wanted to charm his way out of trouble. Hey sis, thanks for coming. I sat down, arms crossed. This better be good. He sighed dramatically. Look, I know things have been tense, but this doesn't have to be a war. You have that money and I made a mistake. A big one. If I can pay off the loan, Dad can stabilize the business, Mom won't lose it, and everything goes back to normal. There is no normal, I said flatly. His mask slipped for a second. Oakley, please, I need this. No, Mason, I said, you want this, there's a difference. Then, like he'd rehearsed it, he slid a document across the table. Just sign this. It gives me temporary access to the funds, I'll pay you back. I looked down. It wasn't temporary access. It was a full transfer authorization. If I'd signed it, he could have taken every cent and walked away. I met his eyes. Wow, you really thought I wouldn't read it, didn't you? His face reddened. You're blowing this out of proportion. No, I said, standing. For once, I'm seeing things clearly. I left him there, staring after me, the unsigned paper between us like a line I was never crossing again. As Lily and I walked home, the evening air biting at our cheeks, she nudged me. You realize what just happened, right? You outplayed him. I smiled for real this time. Yeah, I guess I did. I'd always thought of family drama as something that happened behind closed doors. Whispered arguments, passive-aggressive comments at dinner. The kind of things no one else ever saw. But what happened in the weeks after I left home wasn't whispered anymore. It was war. The morning after my meeting with Mr. Green, I sat in his office downtown. It was an old brick building with creaky floors and sunlight streaming through dusty blinds. For once, I didn't feel like some kid tagging along to hear adults talk. I felt like the adult. I had a purpose. Mr. Green greeted me with a firm handshake. Miss Watts, he said, I'm glad you came in so quickly. The sooner we secure the funds, the harder it will be for anyone to interfere. I sat across from him, hands folded in my lap. I want to make sure my parents can't touch a single cent, I said. My voice didn't shake this time. He smiled slightly. Good. We'll transfer the check into a new trust account under your name. You'll be the sole trustee. No one, not even family, can withdraw from it without your written and notarized consent. Once that's in place, your father's threats won't hold much legal weight. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. Thank you. He pushed some papers toward me. We'll need your signature here and here, and I strongly recommend we file a fraud alert with the bank just in case. I signed. Each stroke of the pen felt like I was taking back a piece of myself. When I walked out of his office, the air felt crisper. Like I'd stepped out of a fog, but the peace didn't last long. By the time I got back to Lily's, my phone was blowing up again. This time, it wasn't just my parents, it was people, classmates, neighbors, even my old soccer coach. The messages all had the same tone, judgment. Heard you're suing your parents. WTF? Mason said you're keeping money meant to save the family business. That true? Why are you doing this to them? I froze mid-step. Oh my God, I muttered. Lily peeked over my shoulder. Going public, she said. Classic smear campaign. It started small. Mason's Instagram story, a carefully worded post about betrayal within families with a blurry photo of a check in the background. Then Dad must have called a few concerned friends, because soon half the town was buzzing with some version of the story. Oakley is selfish. Oakley is suing her own family. Oakley is ruining everything. None of them mentioned the part where they tried to steal from me first. At first, I wanted to hide. I deleted 3 drafted replies to Mason's post before throwing my phone across Lily's couch in frustration. I can't win this, I said. Everyone already thinks I'm the villain. Lily picked it up, tossed it back to me. Then stop trying to win their version, build your own. Her words stuck with me. That night, I opened my laptop and started typing. I didn't post some dramatic rant or long speech. I just wrote, "My grandmother gave me something to build my future. I'm protecting it." That's all I'll say for now. Simple, direct, no names, no mudslinging, but it felt like reclaiming my voice. The response was mixed. Some people supported me quietly in DMs. Others doubled down with nasty comments. One woman even wrote, "Ungrateful brat, your parents raised you." It hurt, but it didn't crush me the way it would have before. Meanwhile, my parents escalated. I got an official letter from their lawyer, yes, their lawyer, accusing me of unjust withholding of family assets. I almost laughed when I read it. Mr. Green did laugh when I showed him. "This is smoke," he said, tapping the paper. "They're bluffing, but don't underestimate them. Desperate people make reckless moves." He was right. 2 nights later, Lily and I were watching TV when headlights swept across the window. A familiar car. My stomach clenched. "Dad," he knocked on the door hard. Mrs. Thompson answered, calm as ever. "Can I help you?" "I'm here for my daughter," he said. His voice was low, controlled, but I knew that tone. It was the one he used right before something exploded. I stepped into the hallway. "You can't just show up here," I said. His eyes locked on me. "Oakley, we're done playing games. You come home tonight, sign over the money, and this ends." I crossed my arms. "No." His jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grind. "This isn't just about you. Your mother is sick over this. Mason is suffering. You're tearing this family apart." The guilt punches used to work. This time they didn't land. "No, Dad, you did that when you tried to steal from me." For a split second, his mask slipped. Rage flickered. "You're making a mistake you'll regret," he said, voice low. Mrs. Thompson stepped between us then, solid as a wall. "Mr. Watts, if you have legal matters, handle them in court, not on my doorstep." He stared at her, then at me, then turned and stormed off into the night. When the door closed, I realized my hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I wasn't the little girl who stayed quiet anymore. The smear campaign didn't die down, it evolved. Within a week, Mason's betrayal post had turned into a whole narrative. He started doing little live videos, casually mentioning how some people just don't care about family anymore. He never said my name, but he didn't have to. Everyone in our small town knew exactly who he was talking about. My old history teacher commented, "So disappointed." My boss at the diner started giving me fewer shifts. Even some of my so-called friends ghosted me completely. I wasn't surprised. Hurt? Yes. But surprised? No. Small towns love drama, and nothing tastes better than watching a good family fall apart. Lily was fuming. "We should blast them online," she said, pacing her bedroom like a lawyer about to destroy someone in court. "Expose everything. The forged letter, the loan, the way Mason tried to trick you into signing that transfer." I shook my head. "Not yet. If I play their game now, I'll look exactly like the bitter, selfish girl they're painting me to be. I need to be smarter." She threw herself onto the bed beside me. "You're already smarter than all of them." Her confidence gave me strength, but inside, I knew this was a marathon, not a sprint. One evening, I went to the local coffee shop to study for my upcoming college placement exams. Halfway through my notes, Mason walked in like he owned the place. He spotted me instantly. "Of course." "Oakley," he said, pulling out the chair across from me. "We need to talk." I didn't even look up. "We already did. Remember the cafe, the fake transfer document?" He laughed like it was all a misunderstanding. "You're being so dramatic. That was a business proposal." "You're not exactly a financial genius, Oak. You don't know what to do with that money." I finally looked at him. "And you do? You mean like when you invested in a startup run by guys who spent the funding on yachts?" His smile faltered. "That's not the point. The point is, this is bigger than you. If the bank forecloses, Dad loses everything. Mom will have to sell the cabin, will be humiliated. Do you want that on your conscience?" He was good. He'd always been good. Mason could twist guilt like a knife. I leaned back, staring at him. "No, what I want is for all of you to stop acting like my future is collateral damage in your mistakes." Something cold flickered in his eyes. "You're going to regret this." And then, under his breath, barely audible, "Grandma would have chosen me." It hit harder than I expected, not because I believed it, but because a part of me knew Mason believed it. After he left, I sat there for a long time, hands clenched around my coffee cup. My old instinct was to crumble under his words. Instead, I opened my phone and started recording a voice memo. I detailed exactly what he'd said, not because I planned to post it, but because I wanted a record. That night, I started collecting everything. Screenshots of posts, messages from family friends, voicemails from my parents. Even those quiet little threats Mason slipped between his smiles. I bought a cheap external hard drive and labeled it evidence. It felt dramatic but necessary. Meanwhile, my parents switched tactics. Instead of direct threats, Mom started sending concerned emails. "Sweetheart, please come home. Mason is struggling. Your father can't sleep." This money was meant for all of us. Think about the family name. I'd read each one carefully, then archived them. They were attempts to build a paper trail to make it look like I was unreasonable. Mr. Green had warned me this might happen. "They're not just trying to break you emotionally," he'd said. "They're trying to create a narrative they can use legally if it comes to that." So I built mine too. Calm, factual, detailed. Midway through that week, I caught something unexpected. Mason slipped up on a live stream. Someone asked if they were going to court, and he laughed and said, "Well, if things go the way Dad's planning, she won't have a choice." The way he said "Dad's planning" made my stomach tight. I clipped the stream and saved it. Later that night, Lily and I spread all the evidence across her bedroom floor, printouts, screenshots, notes. It looked like one of those detective boards from crime shows, minus the red string. "Okay," Lily said, tapping the livestream transcript. "This is gold. He basically admitted they're plotting something." "Yeah," I said, "but we can't jump too early. I need to let them think they're ahead. That's when they'll make a mistake." She grinned. "You're scaring me a little." "In a good way." I smiled back, but deep down there was a knot of sadness I couldn't untangle. This was my family, the people who were supposed to have my back, and here I was treating them like opponents in a legal chess match. Because they were. The turning point came at the end of that week. I received a formal notice from the bank. Someone had attempted to access the trust account using a forged authorization letter. The signature looked almost like mine, but not quite. I stared at the letter for a long time, feeling a strange mix of fury and vindication. They made their move. I stared at the letter for what felt like hours. My name was scrawled across the bottom, neat enough to fool someone who didn't know my handwriting. But I knew. The loops on the O were too tight. The W didn't have the dip I always made without thinking. This wasn't a sloppy prank. Whoever forged this knew my signature. There were only 2 people in the world who'd watched me sign enough documents to mimic it that closely: my parents. My hands shook not from fear this time, but from the cold, clean burn of betrayal. Again, Lily hovered over my shoulder. "That's wow, they really did it." "They really did," I whispered. I called Mr. Green immediately. He picked up on the first ring, his voice already tight like he'd been expecting this. "Oakley, I saw the bank's alert. Are you okay?" I took a deep breath. "They forged my signature." "I know," he said. "The bank flagged it within minutes. They're launching a fraud investigation. I'm coming by this afternoon. We need to document everything." By the time he arrived, Lily's parents had cleared off their dining table so we could spread out all the documents. Mr. Green laid the forged authorization letter beside genuine samples of my signature. Side by side, the differences were obvious to anyone paying attention. He tapped his pen against the fake signature. "This isn't amateur work. Whoever did this had access to your handwriting over time." "My dad," I said flatly. "He handles all the house paperwork. He's seen me sign 100 school forms." Mr. Green nodded slowly. "We'll let the bank's fraud team run their course, but I'm going to file a preliminary report with the county attorney as well. If this goes where I think it's going, we'll be in court sooner than I expected." The word court sent a strange shiver through me, not fear exactly, but a sense that the ground under our family had shifted permanently. Later that day, the bank called me for a recorded statement. I sat in Lily's room, headphones in, answering each question carefully. Dates, times, how the letter had arrived, who had access to my signature. My answers were clear, precise. When I hung up, Lily flopped onto the bed. "You realize your dad just committed actual fraud, right? Like, not just bad parenting, a crime?" "Yeah," I said quietly, "I realize." That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my mind spinning. I'd always known my dad could be manipulative, controlling, but I'd never truly believed he'd cross a legal line, not like this. The next morning, the fallout began. Mason showed up at the coffee shop where I worked a few shifts a week, leaning against the counter like he owned the place. "So," he said casually, "I heard you reported Dad." I froze mid-order. "I didn't report him, the bank did." He smirked. "Yeah, sure, keep telling yourself that. You think he's the bad guy now? You're tearing this family apart for money, Oakley. Do you even hear yourself?" Something inside me snapped. I stepped out from behind the counter, closing the space between us. "No, Mason, he did that when he decided forging my signature was okay. When he decided my future didn't matter. That's on him." His smirk faltered for a split second, but he covered it quickly. "You're unbelievable." He stormed out, muttering something about traitors. I expected anger from my parents next, and they delivered right on schedule. That evening, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Dad. His voice was low, measured, but there was venom in every word. "You think you're clever, don't you? Running to lawyers, hiding behind banks. You're making this harder than it needs to be. If this investigation hurts the family business, Oakley, that's on you, not me." I replayed it twice. Then I forwarded it straight to Mr. Green. 2 days later, the bank formally notified my father that they were cooperating with law enforcement. They froze all suspicious activity related to the forged letter and informed him that attempting to contact me about it could be considered witness tampering. He responded the way I knew he would, by escalating. First came the messages about talking this out like a family. Then came the public pity parade. Mom posted a long Facebook message about a daughter's betrayal and a father's broken heart. It was vague enough to seem sympathetic, but anyone who knew us understood exactly who she meant. The comments poured in. People offered prayers. Others took sides. A few brave souls defended me, but they were drowned out by the noise. One comment in particular stuck with me: "No amount of money is worth losing your family over." I stared at it for a long time, feeling that familiar ache in my chest. Except this wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the fact that my family had chosen greed and manipulation over love and trust. That weekend, Mr. Green sat me down. "The bank has handed everything to the district attorney's office," he said. "They're not filing charges yet, but they're treating this seriously. Oakley, this might get ugly. Your father could face legal consequences." I nodded slowly. "I understand. Are you ready for that?" I thought of his voice on the voicemail, the forged letter, the way he'd looked at me on Lily's porch that night, like I was a problem to be solved, not a daughter. "Yes," I said. "I am." For the first time, I meant it. The investigation changed everything. It wasn't some abstract legal threat anymore, it was real. There were case numbers, file references, dates, statements. And for once, I wasn't the one standing on shaky ground. Mr. Green started working with the bank's fraud team to compile every shred of evidence. I gave statements twice in 1 week, once over the phone, once in person. Both times I sat tall in the chair, no longer the timid girl who second-guessed every word. I was learning how to own my story. Lily helped me organize everything into a neat timeline on her wall: the check delivery, the confrontation, the bank freeze, Mason's livestream, the forged authorization attempt. It looked almost ridiculous, like some true crime series storyboard. Except this time, I wasn't the victim on the board, I was the one holding the string. Meanwhile, the town was splitting. There were people who believed the Watts family version, Oakley's greedy, ungrateful, trying to destroy her father's business. And then there were the people quietly sending me messages saying things like, "Good for you," or "My parents did something similar. Keep fighting." One message came from a woman I barely remembered from church. "When I was your age, my parents drained my college fund to cover my brother's gambling debt. I wish I'd had your courage back then." I read it 3 times. It hit deeper than any comment online. It wasn't just about me. This story echoed in other families too, but my parents weren't backing down. Mom sent me another email, this time laced with sugar and poison. "Sweetheart, please. Your father is under so much stress because of what's happening. If you withdraw the complaint and sign over part of the money, the bank might reconsider pressing charges. We can fix this together as a family." I forwarded it to Mr. Green without replying. He responded within minutes: "Do not engage. Let them build their own case against themselves." So I didn't. Instead, I doubled down. I started researching how trusts and inheritances worked. I spent hours online, reading forums where other young adults shared horror stories about parents draining their accounts, forging signatures, emotionally blackmailing them. It was brutal and weirdly comforting. I wasn't alone. Mr. Green suggested we file a formal civil injunction preventing my parents from contacting me about financial matters outside of legal channels. It sounded extreme at first, but then I thought about my dad showing up at Lily's house in the middle of the night, his voice low and threatening. I signed the paperwork. When the injunction was delivered, my parents' response was explosive. Mason made another cryptic Instagram post. Some people would rather destroy their own blood than lift a finger to help. Mom updated her Facebook profile picture to an old family photo, one where I was about 13, smiling between her and Dad. The caption, "Families should stick together," it was manipulative, strategic, designed to pull at the town's collective heartstrings, and it worked on some. An old family friend stopped me at the grocery store. "Honey, your poor parents, you're tearing them apart. Can't you just let them fix things? I smiled politely and walked away, but inside, a storm was building. They were still playing the same game. The difference was, this time I wasn't reacting, I was calculating. One night, after hours of scrolling through Grandma Edith's old email archives, she'd been surprisingly tech-savvy for her age, I found something curious, a folder labeled Estate Contingencies. Inside were several PDFs, drafts of her will. Some were marked void, others final. I clicked through each carefully. In one of the earlier drafts, there was a clause I didn't remember seeing in the final will Mr. Green had shown me. In the event that any member of my family attempts to unlawfully seize Oakley Watts's inheritance, all remaining assets allocated to said member shall be revoked and redistributed at my discretion. I blinked. Then read it again. This was it. This was the kind of clause that could turn everything upside down. If something like this existed in the final version, even partially, it meant my parents' actions could cost them their entire inheritance. I emailed the file to Mr. Green that night with a single line, "Is this enforceable?" He replied the next morning, "If that clause made it into the final version, or even if there's evidence she intended it, this could be a game changer. Let me cross-check with the probate records." For the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope, not just the quiet, fragile kind, but sharp and bright. Meanwhile, Mason was starting to unravel. His once polished image was cracking under the pressure. Someone leaked a screenshot of him bragging about fixing everything once Oakley caves in a group chat. It spread fast. People started questioning the story. Suddenly, I wasn't just the greedy daughter. I was the girl standing up to something rotten. Still, late at night, lying on Lily's couch, the doubts crept in. What if this destroyed them completely? What if Dad really ended up in court? What if Mom never forgave me? But then I'd think about that forged letter, about Grandma's neat handwriting on the check, about the way Mason smirked when he thought he'd trapped me, and I'd whisper into the dark, "I'm not the one who started this." The letter from the district attorney's office arrived on a Wednesday morning. Lily brought in the mail like it was any other day, a bowl of cereal in one hand and a stack of envelopes in the other. "Bills, coupons, jury duty? Ooh," she said, pausing. "This one's official." The envelope had that heavy cream-colored paper that always makes my stomach tight. I tore it open carefully. "The district attorney's office requests your presence for an interview regarding the ongoing investigation into suspected forgery and attempted bank fraud involving the trust account of Oakley Watts." I sat down slowly. It wasn't fear that hit me, it was the realization that this wasn't some family spat anymore. This was real, criminal. Lily leaned over. "They want you to testify, don't they?" "Not in court yet," I said, scanning the rest. "Just an official interview. But yeah, this is happening." Mr. Green was calm when I called him. "This is a good sign," he said. "It means they're taking the case seriously. I'll be with you at the interview. Just stick to the facts like you've been doing." "You've done nothing wrong." The interview was held in a quiet conference room downtown. No dramatic courtroom, no flashing cameras, just two investigators, a recorder, Mr. Green, and me. They asked precise questions. When I discovered the forged letter, how I knew it wasn't mine, who had access to my signature, whether my parents had ever pressured me before. I answered everything steadily. But when they asked, "Who do you believe forged the signature?" my throat tightened. "My father," I said finally. The words hung in the air like smoke. For the first time, it didn't feel like I was betraying him. It felt like I was telling the truth. 2 days later, the investigation leaked. I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. News articles, local blogs, even a couple of regional stations picked it up. The headline was everywhere. "Local business owner under investigation for forgery in family inheritance dispute." Dad's name wasn't printed, but everyone knew. In a town like ours, names don't need to be said to be known. Mom's response was immediate. She posted a long, emotional paragraph about how devastating it is when private family matters are dragged into the public eye, implying that I was the one who leaked it. Mason went live again, face full of fake solemnity. "You know, families fight, but some fights shouldn't involve lawyers and police." He stared into the camera like some moral authority, conveniently forgetting the forged document. Town exploded. People took sides louder than before. My DMs filled with both support and venom. Some people called me brave, others called me a snake. I tried to stay focused on the bigger picture. Mr. Green assured me the DA's office was moving forward methodically. "They're building a case," he said. "Slow is good. It means they're thorough." But the cracks in my family started showing in ways I hadn't expected. Mason showed up at Lily's house one night, not swaggering, not smirking, just off. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair unkempt. "We need to talk," he said. Lily hovered by the door like a bodyguard, but I nodded. "Okay, 5 minutes." We sat on the porch steps, the air cool and sharp. He rubbed his face like he hadn't slept in days. "They're fighting," he said finally. "Mom and Dad, all the time. She's blaming him for everything. He's blaming me. It's bad, Oak." For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "You think this is my fault?" I asked. He shook his head, then laughed bitterly. "I don't even know anymore. I just know everything's falling apart, and you're out here playing lawyer like you don't care." "I do care," I said quietly, "but caring doesn't mean letting you walk all over me." His jaw tightened. "If Dad goes down for this, it's over. The business, the house, the cabin, everything." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. He knew I'd found the mortgage documents weeks ago. He stood abruptly. "I hope you're happy." "I'm not," I said softly, "but I'm not the one who forged my signature." His shoulders stiffened before he walked away. A week later, the DA's office issued a formal notice. They were pursuing charges for attempted forgery and bank fraud. It wasn't a full indictment yet, but it was enough to send shockwaves through the family. Dad's lawyer tried to play it off as a misunderstanding, but the bank's forensic handwriting analysis was damning. "Mr. Green told me privately, your father's in real trouble. If he keeps pushing, this could end up in court. If he backs down now, they might negotiate." I expected my parents to reach out. They didn't. Instead, I got a message from an unknown number one night. "You don't know what you've started. You'll regret this." Mr. Green traced it. It came from a burner phone, probably Mason trying to scare me. Lily looked at me across her bedroom, her eyes wide. "They're unraveling." And they were. The perfect Watts family image was cracking like glass under pressure. Meanwhile, Mr. Green finally got back to me about the clause I'd found in Grandma Edith's old documents. "Oakley, that clause is not in the final will on record, but there are references to it in her drafts filed with the probate court. It looks like she was planning to include it but revised late. However, if we can prove intent, it might still hold legal weight." Intent, that was the word. Grandma had always been meticulous. If she had left a paper trail, there might be letters, drafts, or emails that clarified what she wanted. I went back through her folders, combing through every scrap of correspondence I could find. And then, buried in a long thread between her and Mr. Green from months before her death, I found it. "If any of them ever try to take what's Oakley, I want the rest of their inheritance revoked. No exceptions." I stared at the sentence, my heart pounding. This was it. The smoking gun. The email sat in my inbox like a glowing ember. "If any of them ever try to take what's Oakley, I want the rest of their inheritance revoked. No exceptions." I read it over and over until the words blurred together. Grandma Edith had written that months before she died in a message to Mr. Green. It wasn't part of the final will, but it was intent. Clear, deliberate, documented intent. When I showed it to Mr. Green, his reaction was immediate. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers, a rare flicker of satisfaction in his usually calm eyes. "This," he said, tapping the printed email with his pen, "is powerful. The will may not contain the clause explicitly, but this shows her intention. If we file this alongside her earlier drafts, the probate court could consider this legally binding under the doctrine of testamentary intent." I raised an eyebrow. "English, please," he chuckled. "If we prove she intended for this clause to apply, your parents' actions, trying to seize your inheritance, could result in them losing their own shares of her estate, permanently." The idea took a moment to land. "So, if we use this, they could lose everything?" "Yes," he said simply. "The house, the cabin, any remaining financial assets from your grandmother's estate, all of it." It wasn't triumph I felt in that moment. It was something heavier. The thought of wiping out what little they had left felt cold. Final, but then I remembered my dad's voice in that voicemail, low and threatening. Mason's smug grin at the cafe, Mom's carefully worded posts painting me as the villain. I took a deep breath. "Do it," Mr. Green nodded. "We'll file a petition to amend the probate interpretation based on new evidence. Once it's filed, your parents will be legally notified." The filing went through 2 days later. The reaction was nuclear. My mom showed up outside Lily's house, again, this time sobbing like she was auditioning for a daytime drama. Lily's parents kept her on the porch. I watched through the window as she pleaded with Mrs. Thompson, hands clutching the fabric of her sweater. "She's trying to destroy us," she cried. "She's my daughter. How can she do this?" I almost opened the door. Almost. But then I remembered every message, every lie, every moment she'd chosen appearances over me. This wasn't about destroying them. This was about defending myself. Meanwhile, Mason spiraled further. His social media posts became erratic, one moment defiant, the next passive-aggressive, then suddenly nostalgic, posting childhood photos of us with captions like, "We were happy once." It was calculated, of course, playing the broken brother card, and people ate it up. Comments flooded in about how siblings shouldn't fight like this and money ruins families. Money didn't ruin us. Their choices did. Mr. Green called me into his office for a strategy meeting. "The DA's office is moving forward with the forgery case," he said, "and now the probate petition is in play. We need to decide how aggressive you want to be." I hesitated. "What are the options?" 1. We let the criminal case run its course. If your father's found guilty, the civil consequences will follow naturally. 2. We push hard on the probate clause now, force their hand legally, and potentially strip their inheritance before the criminal case finishes. "And if we do that," he looked at me seriously, "they'll have no way out, no assets, no leverage. It will end this fight decisively but brutally." I stared at the folder on his desk. My name was on it now, bold and permanent, Watts v. Watts probate amendment petition. I thought about the little girl I used to be. The one who tried to make everyone happy, who kept quiet at dinner so Mason could shine. She would have begged Mr. Green to back off. But that girl didn't survive what they did to me. I met his eyes. "We go all in." The next week was chaos. My parents received the probate filing, and Mom's response came within hours. A furious email accusing me of turning Grandma's legacy into a weapon. Dad didn't write. He called. I didn't pick up. His voicemail was short, cold, and terrifyingly controlled. "You've made your choice. Don't think for a second there won't be consequences." I forwarded it to Mr. Green. "Good," he said. "Let him keep making my job easier." Meanwhile, the town's support began to shift. The leaked investigation details, Mason's inconsistent behavior, and whispers about the mortgage on Grandma's cabin started spreading. People who'd previously shamed me started keeping their distance from my parents. Some even approached me quietly at the cafe, saying things like, "We didn't know it was that bad." The social facade was cracking. Then came the pre-hearing conference. It wasn't a full court hearing yet, just a meeting with both legal teams and the probate judge to outline the case. I sat in the conference room, hands folded, while my parents sat across the table. Mom's eyes were red and puffy. Dad looked like stone. Mason wasn't invited. This wasn't his domain anymore. Their lawyer tried to spin it, claiming the clause was an outdated draft and irrelevant to the final will. Mr. Green calmly slid the printed email across the table. The silence that followed was thick. The judge leaned back. "This is compelling evidence of testamentary intent. We will hear arguments at the next session." My dad's jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. Walking out of that room, I didn't feel scared anymore. For the first time, I felt like I was standing on solid ground while they scrambled. The courthouse smelled like polished wood and old paper. It wasn't a place I ever imagined myself walking into at 19, wearing a blazer Lily insisted I borrow, holding a folder with my name on it like it was a shield. The probate hearing was scheduled for 9:00 a.m., but we arrived early. Mr. Green liked to be the first in the room. "Control the energy before they can," he'd said with a small smile. The courtroom was modest, more like a meeting chamber than a grand legal hall. A single judge's bench, rows of wooden pews, a few reporters lingering in the back. The case had attracted local attention, thanks to weeks of whispers and leaked documents. Mom and Dad entered together, but they didn't feel together. She clutched her purse like a lifeline, her eyes darting around nervously. He walked stiffly, jaw set, radiating a quiet fury. They didn't look at me. The bailiff called the session to order, and the judge, a stern woman with steel-gray hair and a voice that could cut glass, looked down at us. "We're here to address a petition to amend the probate interpretation of the late Edith Watts's estate, based on newly submitted evidence. Counsel, proceed." Mr. Green stood smoothly, every movement calm and deliberate. "Your Honor, the petitioner, Miss Oakley Watts, is the primary beneficiary of a trust account left by her late grandmother. We are presenting documentary evidence that the decedent intended to include a clause revoking inheritance from any family member who unlawfully attempted to seize Oakley's share." He handed copies to the clerk. They were distributed to the judge and opposing counsel, my parents' lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit who'd clearly underestimated me. "This evidence," Mr. Green continued, "includes email correspondence between the decedent and this office, as well as early drafts of the will filed in probate records. The intent is clear, Your Honor. And recent actions by Mr. and Mrs. Watts, specifically the attempted forgery of Oakley's signature to access her trust, fall squarely within the parameters of that intent." The courtroom was silent except for the soft shuffle of papers. The opposing lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor, these are drafts, not the final will. They hold no legal standing. Testamentary intent is irrelevant when it's not codified in the executed document." Mr. Green smiled like a chess player who'd been waiting for that move. "Not entirely, counsel. Under Maine probate law, testamentary intent may be considered when there is clear and convincing evidence that the decedent's wishes were omitted by clerical error or revision under duress. We will show that Mrs. Edith Watts made deliberate reference to this clause shortly before her passing and intended it to apply." He gestured to the printed email, the one with Grandma's unmistakable words, "If any of them ever try to take what's Oakley, I want the rest of their inheritance revoked. No exceptions." You could feel the air shift when the judge read that line. My parents' lawyer tried to object, but the judge held up her hand. "I've read the correspondence. We will proceed to evidentiary hearing. This is compelling." For the first time since this all began, Dad's face cracked, just slightly. His eyes flicked to me cold and sharp, but beneath it I saw something new: fear. Mom, on the other hand, looked devastated. Her hands trembled in her lap. She mouthed something I couldn't fully read. Maybe why, maybe stop. The hearing continued for hours. Mr. Green presented Grandma's drafts, the email thread, and testimony from his paralegal, who'd been present when she discussed her intentions. The opposing counsel flailed, trying to argue technicalities, but the judge was clearly unimpressed. At one point, she looked directly at my parents and said, "You do understand that if this clause is enforced, you stand to lose your inheritance entirely?" Dad's jaw flexed. "We understand," he said through clenched teeth. Mom whispered something, but the microphone didn't catch it. When the hearing adjourned for the day, the judge announced her decision would be delivered in writing within a week. But the damage was already done. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I wasn't used to cameras, but Lily, bless her, stood behind me like a personal bodyguard, whispering, "Don't say too much. One clear line, that's it." So when a reporter asked, "Oakley, do you feel guilty for taking legal action against your parents?" I answered simply, "I'm protecting what my grandmother gave me, that's all." No drama, no tears, just truth. Later that night, Lily and I sat in her kitchen eating cold pizza, replaying the hearing in our heads. "You were a beast in there," she said, grinning. "I swear, when the judge read that email, your dad's soul left his body." I laughed, surprising myself. It felt good. Not because I'd humiliated them, but because for the first time, the truth wasn't something I carried alone. It was on record, public, real. The next few days were tense. Mom tried calling again, leaving voicemails full of tears and pleas to end this before it goes too far. But it was already too far. The town, too, had changed its tune. People who once gossiped now whispered apologies. Some even sent letters of support. A local blog ran an article titled "The Watts Family Feud, A Lesson in Greed and Legacy." I didn't care about public opinion as much as I thought I would. The real victory was quieter. The silence in my chest where fear used to live. I wasn't scared anymore. The judge's decision came on a rainy Monday morning. I was sitting at Lily's kitchen table, laptop open, staring blankly at an article about financial aid forms when the email notification pinged. My stomach clenched even before I read the subject line. In re, the estate of Edith Watts, court order regarding testamentary intent. My hands trembled just slightly as I clicked it open. The ruling was clear, direct. No fluff. The court finds clear and convincing evidence that the decedent, Edith Watts, intended for the revocation clause contained in earlier drafts of her will to apply in the event of unlawful attempts to seize the petitioner's inheritance. The court hereby recognizes this intent and modifies the probate interpretation accordingly. As a result, any party found to have engaged in such unlawful activity shall forfeit their remaining inheritance under the estate. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Then Lily leaned over, eyes wide. "Oh my God, Oakley, you won?" I didn't cheer, I didn't cry. I just sat back in my chair and let the words sink in. I won. The court had effectively stripped my parents of their inheritance. The house, the cabin, the remaining assets, everything that wasn't tied up in my trust was now subject to forfeiture. Mr. Green called within minutes. "Congratulations," he said simply. "This is huge." The ruling is airtight. They can appeal, but frankly, I doubt they'll get far. The email was a smoking gun. I exhaled slowly, my hands gripping the edge of the table. "So what happens now?" "They'll be notified today," he said, "and so will the DA's office. This will likely affect the criminal case too. We may see plea negotiations." By noon, the news had spread. Mom showed up outside Lily's house again, but this time she didn't cry. she screamed. "You ruined us." She shouted from the front lawn as Lily's dad calmly told her to leave. "Do you understand what you've done? We're going to lose everything. The house, the cabin, you're my daughter. How could you do this to your own family?" I stood by the upstairs window, watching through the rain-speckled glass. There was a time when that scene would have shattered me. Now it just hurt in a quieter way, like pressing on an old bruise. Lily's mom threatened to call the police, and eventually Mom drove off, tires splashing through puddles. That evening, Mason called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. He didn't even say hello. "What the hell did you do?" "I defended myself," I said calmly. "They're taking the house, Oakley. The cabin, do you even care?" I closed my eyes. "Do you care that Dad forged my signature, that you tried to trick me into signing over the money, that Mom turned half the town against me?" He was silent for a moment. Then, bitterly, "You could have fixed this without going nuclear." "No, Mason," I said quietly. "You and Dad lit the match. I just stopped pretending the fire wasn't real." He hung up without another word. The official notice of forfeiture was delivered to my parents 2 days later. Their lawyer filed a motion to appeal, but Mr. Green told me it was weak, mostly procedural, no real argument. The fallout was swift. The bank, now armed with the court's ruling and the DA's investigation, froze several of my father's personal accounts pending review. The family business lost its line of credit overnight. Suppliers started backing out. It was like watching a dam crack, then burst. The cabin, my grandmother's favorite place, was placed under estate control. It would eventually be transferred to me as part of my trust's expansion, but for now, it was locked up tight, off limits to my parents. Mom started leaving me voicemails every night, oscillating between begging and rage. "Please, Oakley, you're all we have left. You'll regret this when we're gone." "How could you betray your family like this?" I forwarded them all to Mr. Green. Mason, meanwhile, began to unravel publicly. He posted a long, emotional rant on Instagram about greed and family betrayal. It went viral locally, not in the supportive way he probably wanted. People flooded the comments with receipts, screenshots, even clips from his earlier live streams. The town wasn't buying the hero act anymore. And then something happened that surprised even me. A few of my old teachers and neighbors reached out, not with gossip, but with support. One of them, Mrs. Hanley, my old English teacher, wrote, "Oakley, I always knew you were stronger than people gave you credit for. Standing up to your family isn't easy, but you've done it with grace." I read that message alone in Lily's room and cried, not out of sadness, but release. The girl who'd once been afraid to speak at the dinner table was now the one holding her entire family accountable. The indictment came 2 weeks after the probate ruling. I was at the diner on a slow Wednesday morning, refilling the coffee machine, when Lily rushed in waving her phone. "It's happening," she whispered breathlessly. "It's official." The headline glared from her screen. Local business owner charged with forgery and attempted bank fraud. There was no ambiguity this time. My father's name was printed in bold letters, along with a grainy photo of him from a community event, smiling stiffly in a suit. The article outlined the DA's case, the forged letter, the handwriting analysis, the failed withdrawal attempt, the investigation timeline. It was real. Criminal charges. My coworkers stared at me when they saw the article. No one said anything, but their glances held a strange mix of curiosity and pity. I kept my head down, finished my shift, and walked home in the cold autumn air, my breath fogging in front of me. Mr. Green called that evening. "The DA's office is confident," he said. "They have overwhelming evidence. Your father will likely be offered a plea deal, but even then, he's looking at fines, probation, maybe even time if he refuses to cooperate." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me had been bracing for this moment, but now that it was here, it didn't feel victorious. It felt heavy. Mason's reaction was explosive. He showed up outside the diner the next morning, pacing like a caged animal. "You destroyed him," he hissed when I stepped out. "No, Mason," I said quietly. "He destroyed himself. You could have stopped this." His voice cracked, not with anger this time, but panic. "You could have dropped the charges. You could have—" "The charges aren't mine to drop," I interrupted. "This is the state. The bank, the DA, not me." He stared at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. "You really are cold." He stormed off before I could say anything else. Mom, meanwhile, wasn't storming anymore. She was unraveling quietly. She stopped showing up outside Lily's house, stopped sending screaming voicemails. Instead, I got sporadic texts, disjointed sentences, sometimes just my name, sometimes apologies that read more like confessions. I didn't know he would do that. We just wanted to keep the house. I don't know who we are anymore. For the first time, I felt something close to pity. The house, the one I grew up in, had a foreclosure notice taped to its front door by the end of the month. Their accounts were frozen, their appeal denied, and the legal bills were mounting like a wave they couldn't outrun. Lily and I drove past one night. The porch light was off. The curtains were drawn. For years, that house had been the epicenter of everything: family dinners, fights, birthdays, lies. Now it stood like a hollow shell. "This is weird," Lily whispered. "Yeah," I said, "it is." I didn't cry, I thought I might, but the tears didn't come. Instead, they came later. Alone in Lily's room, I scrolled through old photos on my phone: family vacations, holiday dinners, blurry snapshots of me and Mason as kids in front of the cabin. We'd been messy, loud, imperfect, but back then, I believed we were safe. I thought of Grandma Edith, how she'd trusted me with her gift. How she'd probably seen this storm coming long before I did. The weight of it all finally broke through. I pressed my hands to my face and sobbed, not the angry, sharp tears from before, but deep, exhausted sobs that felt like they were washing something out of me. Lily didn't say anything. She just sat beside me and handed me a tissue box. That quiet, unspoken solidarity meant more than any words. The criminal case began to move fast. My father entered a not guilty plea at the arraignment, but Mr. Green told me the DA had overwhelming leverage. A plea bargain was almost inevitable. Mason withdrew from social media for a while. Then one night, he showed up at Lily's house, but this time he didn't yell. He stood at the doorway, shoulders slumped. "I don't even know what I'm doing anymore," he said. Neither did I. We sat on the porch steps like we used to as kids, legs swinging idly. For a moment, the weight of lawyers and judges and forged signatures melted away, and we were just siblings again, confused, hurt, but still bound by something older than the chaos. "Do you hate me?" he asked suddenly. I shook my head. "No, I hate what you did, but not you." His eyes glossed over. He didn't reply. When he left, I didn't feel relief. I felt a strange peace, like the storm was beginning to quiet, even if the wreckage was still scattered everywhere. The courtroom was packed the day of my father's sentencing. It wasn't a flashy trial. He'd accepted a plea bargain to avoid a full-blown public spectacle, but the tension in that room was thick enough to taste. Reporters lined the back wall. A few curious townspeople filled the benches, whispering as the lawyers shuffled papers. I sat in the second row with Mr. Green beside me. My hands were cold but steady. This wasn't a fight anymore. This was closure. Dad was brought in wearing his usual suit, but it didn't sit right on him anymore. His shoulders slumped. His face was drawn, pale. For the first time in my life, he didn't look like the man who commanded every room he walked into. He looked small. The judge read through the charges calmly. 1 count of attempted forgery, 1 count of attempted bank fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to unlawfully access a protected trust account. When she asked for his plea, his voice was low. Guilty. He'd taken the plea deal. The DA dropped some charges in exchange for cooperation and repayment. He avoided jail time, but the consequences were still devastating. A felony record, heavy fines, probation, and permanent removal from any administrative access to family or business assets. The judge's words were final and sharp. "You violated not only the law, Mr. Watts, but the trust of your own daughter." This court hopes this sentence serves as both punishment and reminder. Inheritance is a gift, not a debt. I felt something loosen in my chest as she spoke. Not joy, not triumph, just a quiet, deep breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for months. When the hearing adjourned, Dad turned once, looking at me from across the room. For a split second, I saw the man who taught me to ride a bike, who cheered at my middle school graduation, who used to tuck me in when thunderstorms scared me. And then, like fog burning off in sunlight, that image was gone. He didn't approach me. He just walked out flanked by his lawyer, his once commanding presence reduced to the sound of polished shoes echoing down the hallway. Mom didn't come to court that day. Mason sat in the back but left early, head down. Outside, reporters swarmed. "Oakley, how do you feel about your father's sentencing?" I gave them the same answer I'd practiced with Mr. Green. I didn't want this outcome. But actions have consequences. I'm moving forward with my life. Lily squeezed my hand once we got to the car. "You sounded like a total boss," she whispered. I laughed, not forced, not bitter, just free. The weeks that followed felt strangely quiet after months of legal storms. The trust account was secure under my sole authority now. The cabin, after months of legal limbo, was formally transferred to me. It was in bad shape, years of neglect and half-hearted maintenance, but it was mine. Lily and I drove up one crisp Saturday morning. The trees were already shedding orange leaves, the lake was still, and the air smelled like pine and nostalgia. "This place is gorgeous," Lily said, stepping onto the creaky porch. I ran my fingers along the wooden railing Grandma had painted herself years ago. There were chips and cracks, but beneath them the structure held strong. Just like me. We spent the day cleaning out old rooms, uncovering forgotten things. Grandma's recipe cards, boxes of old family photos, a letter addressed to me in her looping handwriting. My Oakley, if you're reading this, it means you're standing here as the owner of this cabin. I always knew you were strong enough to protect what's yours. But don't let this place become just a fortress. Let it be a beginning. I pressed the letter to my chest, my throat tightening. For the first time since my 18th birthday, I felt the future opening up instead of closing in. The house I grew up in was gone. My parents' empire had collapsed. Mason had gone quiet, but I was still here, standing, breathing, building. One evening, sitting on the cabin porch with Lily, wrapped in blankets as the sun set, she nudged me gently. You know, you could turn this place into something beautiful, not just a retreat, a real fresh start. I smiled. Yeah, I think I will. And I meant it. The weeks after the sentencing felt strangely still. For months, my life had been a blur of court dates, legal filings, public drama, and sleepless nights. And then, suddenly, there was quiet. Not the heavy, suffocating quiet of uncertainty, but the kind that comes after a storm, when the wind stops howling, and all that's left is the sound of water dripping from the eaves. I moved some of my things up to the cabin. Lily helped me paint the living room walls a soft cream color. We scrubbed away years of grime, replaced broken light fixtures, and laughed when a family of raccoons tried to claim the attic. It felt good to build something instead of just defending it. But not everything could be scrubbed clean with a coat of paint. One Saturday morning, I got a message from Mom. Just 2 words, "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Lily looked over my shoulder. "You don't have to," she said softly. "I know," I set the phone down, "but I think I want to." We met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun, her clothes plain, her makeup gone. For years, she'd carried herself like the queen of appearances, perfectly put together, always smiling for the neighbors. Now there was no mask, just my mother. "Oakley," she said, voice shaky. "You look good." "Thanks," I replied, sitting across from her. There was a long silence, filled with all the words we'd never said when it mattered. "I don't know where to start," she whispered finally. I didn't stop him. When he forged that letter, I didn't stop him. I didn't protect you." The admission hit me harder than I expected. Not because I didn't know it, but because hearing her say it out loud made it real. "You didn't," I said quietly, her eyes filled with tears. "I told myself it was for the family, for the house. For Mason, I thought you'd forgive us. You were always the good one." I swallowed hard. "I spent years being the good one, but that didn't mean I'd let you take everything from me." She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I know, and I don't expect forgiveness. I needed you to hear it from me, not the papers, not the gossip, me." For the first time, there was no manipulation in her voice, just raw honesty. "I don't hate you," I said after a long pause, "but I can't pretend it didn't happen either. I'm moving forward, Mom. And if you want to be in my life, it has to be different." She nodded, almost as if she'd expected that answer. We talked for nearly an hour, not about money or court or the house, but about us, about Grandma, about the girl I used to be and the woman I was becoming. When we stood to leave, she hugged me hesitantly, like she wasn't sure if she had the right anymore. I let her. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. It wasn't meant to be, but it was something. Mason came next. He showed up at the cabin one afternoon without warning. He looked rough, like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. His usual confidence was gone. "I heard you're fixing this place up," he said, kicking at a loose board on the porch. "Yeah," I said, "it's mine now." He nodded, eyes roaming over the lake, the trees. "Grandma loved it here." "She did." Silence hung between us, but it wasn't the hostile kind anymore. He sat down on the porch steps. "I've been thinking a lot," he muttered. "About what I did, about everything." I leaned against the railing. "And I was jealous," he admitted. "You were always the responsible one. Grandma trusted you. I thought if I took control, I could prove I deserved it more." I didn't interrupt. I just let him talk. "But I was wrong," he continued. "And now everything's gone. Dad's not the same, Mom's barely holding it together, and you actually made it out." "I didn't make it out because I wanted to fight you," I said softly. "I did it because you gave me no choice." He nodded slowly, eyes wet. "I know. We didn't hug, we didn't magically forgive each other. But for the first time, I saw the scared, insecure boy underneath the arrogance. As the sun dipped behind the trees, he stood. "I don't know what happens next," he said. "Neither do I replied. "But I know what doesn't happen, I don't go back." He gave a small, sad smile. "Fair enough." When he left, I sat on the porch long after dark, listening to the crickets. My family was broken, yes. But in that quiet, I realized something important. It wasn't my job to fix them. It never had been. The cabin became my anchor. Every weekend, Lily and I would load her beat-up hatchback with paint cans, toolboxes, and an unreasonable amount of snacks, then drive up into the hills with the windows down and the music blasting. We turned the old, creaky place into something warm and alive again. We sanded floors, patched walls, painted rooms in soft, earthy tones. I refinished the kitchen table Grandma had bought decades ago. Every scrape and dent told a story. One night, as we sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, Lily pointed at the stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt. "You realize," she said with a grin, "you're living every indie coming-of-age movie cliché ever. Girl inherits mysterious cabin. Girl rebuilds life." I laughed, the sound echoing across the lake. "Yeah, but those girls usually end up meeting some brooding carpenter guy." She threw a marshmallow at me. During the week, I focused on my future, the one I got to build on my own terms. I applied for college using Grandma's trust funds the way she intended. I majored in environmental design, inspired by the cabin and all the work I'd poured into restoring it. Mr. Green helped me set up a financial plan: tuition, maintenance, investment. For the first time, I wasn't scared of money. I understood it. The trust wasn't a chain anymore. It was a foundation. I also got my old job back at the diner, but this time I worked because I wanted to, not because I was desperate. The tips helped with day-to-day expenses, but more than that, it kept me grounded. I liked chatting with regulars, watching the town slowly shift its perception of me. People who'd once whispered behind my back now greeted me warmly. Some apologized. Some didn't. Either way, I didn't carry their opinions like weights anymore. My relationship with Mom became cautious but functional. We spoke occasionally, short, honest conversations without the old emotional traps. She started seeing a therapist, and for the first time in years, she was taking responsibility for her choices. Mason was still figuring himself out. He took a job in another city, something unrelated to the family business. He didn't ask me for help, and I didn't offer. But when he texted me a photo of his tiny new apartment with the caption, "Step 1, I smiled. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The first time I spent an entire weekend alone at the cabin, I woke up early to the sound of rain against the roof. I made coffee, wrapped myself in a blanket, and sat by the big window facing the lake. The air was cool and clean. The trees swayed gently in the mist. For so long, that cabin had symbolized everything I had to defend: the inheritance, the legal battle, the betrayal. Now it symbolized something else entirely: freedom. I hung Grandma's letter in a frame on the wall above the kitchen table. Her words, "Let it be a beginning," stared back at me every morning, a quiet reminder that this story wasn't about what I'd lost, but what I'd built from the ashes. Lily joked that I'd turned into cabin girl, but honestly, I loved it. I loved waking up to birdsong instead of slammed doors. I loved knowing that every inch of this space existed because I fought for it. One night, sitting by the fireplace, I wrote in my journal for the first time in months. I thought revenge would feel like fire. But it feels like this: quiet, warm, whole. And for the first time, I truly believed it. When I look back now, it's hard to believe how much can change in a single year. A year ago, I was sitting at the family dinner table, watching my parents and Mason talk over me like I was invisible. I thought keeping quiet would keep the peace. I thought if I didn't rock the boat, things would work themselves out. I was wrong. The truth is, silence doesn't protect you. It protects the people hurting you. I've replayed those early days so many times: the moment I refused to hand over Grandma's check, the shock on Mason's face, the way my father's voice turned cold. It felt like the ground cracked beneath me. I didn't know then that standing my ground would mean tearing apart everything I'd been taught to hold sacred. Family, loyalty, reputation. But what I've learned is that loyalty without respect is just submission, and reputation means nothing if it's built on lies. The battles were brutal. There were days I thought I'd break. Nights I cried until my chest hurt. Moments I almost gave in, not because I thought they were right, but because I was tired. So tired. But every time I wanted to give up, I remembered Grandma Edith's face. The way her eyes sparkled when she told me, "You've got more backbone than all of them put together." She believed in me long before I did. And she was right. I learned how to speak in courtrooms, how to read legal documents I used to find terrifying, how to say no without apologizing. I learned that strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the quiet refusal to be moved. My father is no longer the towering figure he once was. My mother is learning to live outside the shadow of appearances. Mason is out there trying to rebuild his life. And me, I'm building mine from the ground up. The cabin stands as proof. Every nail hammered, every wall repainted, every quiet morning coffee on that porch is a reminder I chose myself, not out of selfishness, out of survival. And here's the part no one tells you about standing up for yourself. The world doesn't magically applaud you. Some people still think I'm cold. Others whisper behind my back. A few have apologized, most haven't, but I don't live for their approval anymore. I live for the morning mist over the lake, for the late-night laughter with Lily, for the future I'm building brick by brick, not borrowed from anyone else. Sometimes, when the sun sets just right, I imagine Grandma sitting on the porch with me. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't have to, because I know what she'd say. You did it, Oakley. Not perfectly, not without scars, but I did it. And if there's one thing I'd tell anyone standing where I once stood, it's this: you are allowed to protect what's yours. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to build a life free from people who only love you on their terms. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like a girl on a porch, sipping coffee in peace, knowing she doesn't owe anyone her silence anymore. This isn't a happy ending. It's something better.